Stepping into the world of the Habsburgs was like entering a dream woven from silk gold, and the most extraordinary feasts. Imagine a time when an entire roasted bear, still clad in its fur, could grace a royal table, its mouth agape with an apple. Picture swans swimming in silver platters, their real feathers meticulously reattached. The sheer scale of their indulgence, the bizarre lengths they went to for a single meal, makes modern lavishness look like a picnic. These weren't just meals. They were carefully staged spectacles, theatrical performance, designed to project immense power and wealth, leaving every guest breathless. Here are 9 of the most unbelievably decadent banquets ever recorded from the annals of Habsburg history, each one a testament to an empire that truly knew how to eat. Number 9. The Feast of the Golden Fleece, 1723. The year was 1723. Emperor Charles VI, a man known for his love of grand display and operatic spectacles, decided to hold an extraordinary chapter meeting for the Order of the Golden Fleece in Vienna. This was not just a dinner. It was a carefully choreographed demonstration of imperial power and piety following his recent coronation as King of Bohemia in Prague, an event already legendary for its cost. The Hofburg Palace in Vienna, already a sprawling maze of chambers and halls, was transformed. The magnificent redouten halls, typically used for balls and masquerades, were adorned with tapestries depicting ancient myths and heroic deeds, their threads shimmering under the soft glow of countless beeswax candles. Chandeliers heavy with crystal descended from the high ceilings, reflecting the light across the polished parquet floors. Guests began to arrive by late afternoon, their carriages pulling up to the main entrance of the Hofburg, liveried footmen opening the doors. Dukes, counts, and princes, all members of the esteemed order, flowed into the reception areas, their ceremonial robes of velvet and gold brocade rustling softly. Each knight wore the distinctive collar of the order, a heavy gold chain from which hung the jewel of the Golden Fleece, a ram's skin. The air hummed with hushed conversations and the distant strains of a court orchestra warming up. The emperor himself, arrayed in a richly embroidered coat and sporting the Golden Fleece collar, greeted his most esteemed guests, a picture of imperial majesty. When the time for the banquet was announced, the guests were led into the grandest dining hall, a space usually reserved for only the most significant state events. The table, a massive U-shape, stretched the length of the hall, covered in the finest damask linen so white it almost glowed. Silverware, each piece bearing the Habsburg double-headed eagle crest, gleamed under the candlelight. Goblets of Bohemian crystal, etched with intricate patterns, stood ready for the finest wines. The central display, a true masterpiece of culinary architecture, was a towering sugar sculpture depicting Jason and the Argonauts arriving in Colchis to retrieve the Golden Fleece, complete with miniature. This sugar piece, as court records indicate, took master confectioners several weeks to complete. The first course arrived, not just one dish, but an entire service of some 30 different plates brought in simultaneously. There were enormous silver platters piled high with roasted capons, their skins lacquered to a golden crisp. Alongside them, roasted pheasants with their bright plumage reattached for display lay on beds of herbs. A truly exotic offering was an entire roasted peacock, its iridescent tail fanned out across a platter, a symbol of extreme luxury. Historical accounts from the imperial kitchens confirm that this peacock had been specifically imported from a menagerie in Italy. For the occasion, there were also smaller dishes, delicate aspics, shimmering with vegetables, suspended within. Towering pates in ornate crusts, shaped like castles, and various game tureens. For the fish course, enormous freshwater pike caught from the Danube were presented whole poached, and then decorated with delicate scales made from sliced almonds. Platters of lobster and crayfish transported fresh from distant coasts were arranged artfully with lemon wedges and dill. Accompanying these were numerous vegetable dishes presented with a sophistication that belied their humble origins. Tiny artichoke hearts sautéed in butter, asparagus tips blanched to perfection, and carrots carved into intricate floral designs. The sheer variety was overwhelming. Guests could sample small portions of dozens of different items from each service. The wine flowed freely. Vintages from the imperial cellars, some decades old, were poured into the crystal goblets by an army of silent, liveried servants. Tokaji Essentia, the legendary sweet wine from Hungary, was served in thimble-sized portions at specific points in the meal, its rarity and cost making it a liquid jewel. Historical records from the imperial cellars show that several hundred bottles of the most prized wines were drawn for this single event. Between courses, musicians performed from a gallery above the dining hall, their melodies blending with the clinking of cutlery and the murmur of conversation. Lute players, violinists, and flutists played pieces composed specifically for imperial occasions. The air became thick with the scent of roasted meats, fragrant herbs, and expensive perfumes worn by the guests. The main meat courses were even more spectacular. A roasted wild boar, its tusks still intact, was brought in on a massive wooden platter, garnished with apples and cranberries. It was flanked by enormous joints of venison, carved tableside by skilled carvers who wielded their knives with precision and theatrical flourish. Another highlight was a dish called pastry of the 12 Apostles, a vast, intricately decorated pie containing 12 different types of meat, each representing an apostle. This complex dish was a culinary and symbolic marvel, requiring immense skill. To prepare desserts were a riot of color and sugar. Pyramids of exotic fruits, carefully sourced from the imperial hothouses or imported from the Mediterranean, stood tall on the table. There were countless types of tarts, custards, and jellies, each molded into whimsical shapes. A popular item was candied violets, a delicate treat imported from France. The sugar sculpture of Jason and the Argonauts remained the centerpiece, untouched, a testament to the fact that not everything was meant to be eaten, but rather admired as art. The feast lasted for many hours, stretching well into the night, a lavish display that cemented Charles VI's reputation as one of Europe's most magnificent monarchs. It was a meal designed to be remembered, a tangible expression of an empire's boundless resources and power. Number 8. The Wedding Feast of Joseph II and Isabella of Parma, 1760. The year 1760 saw Vienna erupt in celebration for the wedding of Archduke Joseph, the future Emperor Joseph II, to the beautiful and intelligent Isabella of Parma. This was not merely a family event. It was a strategic alliance, and Empress Maria Theresa, Joseph's formidable mother, spared no expense in painting the Habsburg dynasty's wealth and prestige. The festivities stretched over several days, but the main wedding feast was the absolute pinnacle of extravagance. The setting for this grand banquet was the new Grand Gallery at Schönbrunn Palace, a hall designed precisely for such monumental occasions. Its immense windows overlooked the meticulously manicured gardens, though on the evening of the feast the view was dominated by the flickering lights of hundreds of torches placed throughout the grounds and the distant boom of celebratory cannons. Inside, the gallery shimmered. Gold stucco work adorned the walls, reflecting the light from thousands of candles held in ornate sconces and colossal chandeliers. The scent of fresh flowers brought in from the imperial greenhouses mingled with the aroma of roasting meats and fine wines. The guest list was a who's who of European royalty and nobility. Ambassadors from every major court, princes of the Holy Roman Empire, and the highest-ranking Austrian aristocrats. Silks, satins, and velvets embroidered with gold and silver thread, adorned with glittering jewels and ancestral orders. The bride, Isabella, looked radiant in her wedding gown, her presence captivating every eye. Joseph, still quite young, carried himself with a quiet dignity, undoubtedly aware of the immense expectations placed upon him. And this union, the dining tables were a sight to behold. They were laid out in a series of interconnected squares, allowing for intricate displays and easier service. The linen was of the purest Irish flax, and the cutlery was solid silver. Crystal glasses, some engraved with the entwined monograms of the bride and groom, sparkled under the candlelight. The centerpieces were not merely decorative, they were edible works of art. One prominent feature was a massive sugar sculpture depicting the mythological wedding of Cupid and Psyche, complete with miniature figures and a spun sugar waterfall. Another featured a meticulously crafted scene of Schönbrunn Palace, itself all made from marzipan and colored sugar, a tribute to the venue. Court records indicate that these culinary masterpieces required a dedicated team of confectioners working round the clock for weeks. The first course or entree arrived with a flourish, carried by dozens of footmen in white gloves and scarlet livery. Each footman approached the table in perfect synchronicity, placing platters down with practiced grace. Among the initial offerings were platters of roasted venison, its rich meat still steaming, garnished with wild mushrooms, gathered from the imperial forests. There were also delicate pâtés of goose liver pressed into intricate molds, and a variety of soups, including a consommé of turtle, highly prized and expensive delicacy. Reports from the court caterers indicate that several large sea turtles had been imported specifically for this single dish. The fish course featured enormous Danube sturgeon, poached whole and presented on silver trays, adorned with their roe and fresh herbs. There were also platters of Rhine salmon smoked and then delicately arranged alongside smaller dishes of fried carp and pike. Alongside these, numerous side dishes were presented. Purees of exotic vegetables, like artichokes, fanned out like delicate blossoms, tiny green beans blanched and tossed with truffle oil, and roasted potatoes designed to stun. Wine flowed like water, though it was wine of the highest quality. Tokati from Hungary, the sweet wine favored by the Habsburgs, was served throughout the meal. Rhine wines, crisp and aromatic, were poured alongside. Heavier Austrian reds from the imperial vineyards. Each glass was refilled almost instantly by the attentive staff. A special feature was a fountain of wine that continuously poured a light, sparkling Hungarian wine into a basin, from which guests could refill their glasses at leisure. This novelty was a true talking point among the guests. Between courses, members of the Imperial Orchestra performed in an adjacent room, their music drifting softly into the grand gallery. Later, acrobats and dancers from the court theater troupe performed short, graceful routines in a designated area of the gallery, adding a visual spectacle to the dining experience. The entire Ande was one of seamless luxury and entertainment. The main roasts were the highlight. Whole roasted oxen, prepared on spits in the palace kitchens, were carved into succulent portions. These were accompanied by platters of roasted wild boar, pheasants, and partridges. One particularly extravagant dish was a roasted swan, its feathers meticulously reattached to create a lifelike presentation, a popular if somewhat bizarre display for grand banquets of the era. This practice, documented in contemporary cookbooks, was designed purely for visual impact. A historical account from the imperial dining steward noted the immense difficulty in preserving the plumage during the roasting process. Desserts were a riot of color and sugar. Pyramids of spun sugar, some reaching several feet high, depicted allegories of love and fertility. Bowls of freshly churned ice cream, flavored with vanilla chocolate and exotic fruits like pineapple, a rare and expensive import, were passed around. There were delicate pastries, small tarts filled with berries and cream, and vast quantities of candied nuts and fruits. The flying dessert was a showstopper. Small pastries suspended on ribbons, seemingly floating above the table, providing a moment of whimsical delight for the guests. The cost of this single wedding feast, combining food, drink, entertainment, and decorations, was estimated by court accountants to be astronomical, a clear statement of imperial might and boundless resources. The memory of this feast, a true imperial dream, lingered in Vienna for years. Number 7. The Grand Banquet for the Congress of Vienna, 1814. The year 1814 saw Vienna become the undisputed social capital of Europe. After decades of Napoleonic wars, the great powers of Europe gathered for the Congress of Vienna, a momentous diplomatic assembly to redraw the map of the continent. While the diplomats debated political boundaries, Empress Maria Ludovica and Emperor Francis I ensured that Vienna's social scene buzzed with an unprecedented level of lavishness. "The Congress does not march but dances," was a popular saying of the time. And nowhere was this more evident than at the countless balls and banquets hosted by the Habsburg court. The grandest of these was a formal banquet held at the Hofburg Palace, designed to impress every foreign dignitary. The setting was the Ritterstube, or Knight's Hall, within the Hofburg, transformed into a dazzling spectacle. The hall, usually a more solemn space, was adorned with immense tapestries depicting classical scenes and heroic battles, their rich colors softened by the light of hundreds of candles in elaborate candelabras. Gilded furniture brought specifically for the occasion was arranged along the wall. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the subtle perfume of the era, mingling with the anticipation of the feast. The guest list was a veritable roll call of European power. Tsar Alexander the First, Prince Metternich of Britain, Prince Talleyrand of France, Prince Talleyrand of France, and King Frederick William, princes and ambassadors, were present. They wore their finest uniforms, adorned with medals and ribbons or court dress of sumptuous silks and brocades. The Empress Maria Ludovica, known for her elegance, presided over the female guests who were equally resplendent in their empire-waisted gowns and sparkling jewels. The sheer concentration of power and wealth in one room was breathtaking. The dining table was of a scale rarely seen, requiring an immense central hall to accommodate it. It was draped in fine white linen, intricately embroidered along its edges. The table settings were of solid gold and silver plate, each piece engraved with the imperial crest. Crystal glasses of various sizes for water, white wine, red wine, and champagne sparkled in the candlelight. The centerpieces were elaborate silver sculptures depicting scenes from Austrian history and mythology, flanked by towering candelabras. Floral arrangements, featuring exotic blooms from the imperial hothouses, filled the remaining spaces, providing bursts of color and fragrance. The banquet began with a grand service, where dozens of dishes were presented simultaneously for each course. The first course included an astonishing array of pulled dishes. There were towering aspics, clear and shimmering, encasing perfectly arranged vegetables and seafood. Pates of foie gras, smooth and rich, were served alongside various terrines made from game meats, like venison and wild boar, intricately decorated with truffles. One unusual delicacy, according to memoirs of the attendees, was a dish of roasted ortolan, a tiny songbird, a controversial but highly prized item in aristocratic dining, served individually to each guest. The fish course featured both freshwater and saltwater fish, a testament to the empire's extensive trade networks. Enormous poached Danube salmon brought in fresh that day were garnished with dill and lemon. Platters of sole turbot and cod, prepared in a variety of sauces, from rich butter sauces to delicate herb broths, were presented. Accompanying these were numerous elaborate side dishes, delicate vegetable purees, gratin dishes, and bowls of tiny new potatoes tossed with parsley. The wine flowed without interruption. Champagne, a relatively new luxury at the time, was served in abundance, its bubbles providing a lively sparkle to the atmosphere. Vintage Rhine and Moselle wines from Germany were offered along with the finest Austrian wines from the emperor's personal vineyards. The legendary Tokaji Essentia was also served, its intense sweetness reserved for moments of true indulgence. Records from the imperial cellars show that hundreds of bottles of the most valuable vintages were consumed during this period of the Congress. Throughout the meal, a full orchestra performed in an adjoining salon, their music providing a constant, elegant backdrop to the conversations. Court singers occasionally performed short arias, adding to the entertainment. The atmosphere was one of refined gaiety and diplomatic networking, but at its heart, it was a showcase of Habsburg power. The main roasts were brought in with a dramatic procession. Whole roasted calves, still glistening from the oven, were carved tableside. There were joints of beef, venison, and lamb, all seasoned with a complex array of herbs and spices. One particularly striking dish was a surprise roast, a boneless goose stuffed with a duck, which was stuffed with a chicken, which was stuffed with a quail, shouting the culinary ingenuity of the court chefs. This layered roast, a form of roti sans Paris, was a common feature of grand banquets, requiring immense skill to prepare and present. Desserts were an architectural marvel. Towering confectionery pieces made from spun sugar, marzipan, and chocolate depicted scenes of peace and prosperity, symbolizing the aims of the Congress. There were dozens of different types of pastries, from delicate fruit tarts to rich chocolate cakes, ice creams, in a variety of exotic flavors, like pistachio and candied ginger, were served in elegant crystal cups. A specialty was Vienna cream, a light frothy dessert made with whipped cream and liqueurs. The sheer volume of sweet dishes was astonishing. The banquet stretched for several hours, concluding with a dazzling display of fireworks over the Schönbrunn Gardens, visible from the Hofburg, a fitting end to a meal that was as much a political statement as a culinary triumph. The dancing Congress certainly knew how to feast. Number 6. Archduke Ferdinand, Karl's name-day feast, 1790. In the year 1790, Vienna was still reeling from the death of Emperor Joseph II, and his brother, Leopold II, had just ascended the throne. Yet, even in a period of transition, the Habsburg court knew the importance of maintaining appearances and celebrating significant family events with appropriate pomp. Archduke Ferdinand, Karl, Leopold's younger brother, and a prominent figure in the imperial family, celebrated his name day with a feast that, while perhaps not on the scale of a coronation, was nonetheless a testament to persistent imperial opulence. This banquet was held at the Hofburg Palace, likely in one of the more intimate but still grand state dining rooms, indicating a blend of family celebration and formal court gathering. The dining hall, though not the largest in the palace, was exquisitely decorated. Walls draped with velvet tapestries bore the imperial double-headed eagle. Silver candelabras, each holding dozens of flickering beeswax candles, cast a warm glow over the scene. The air was perfumed with the gentle scent of fresh flowers arranged in elaborate silver vases and the distant, polite murmur of guests arriving. The guest list comprised high-ranking members of the imperial family, close confidants, and the most influential members of the Austrian nobility. Gentlemen were in their formal court dress, often military uniforms adorned with sashes and medals or rich velvet coats. Ladies wore elegant gowns of silk and lace, their hair styled high and adorned with small pearls or feathers. The Archduke Ferdinand, Karl himself, a man of considerable presence, moved among his guests, exchanging pleasantries. The long dining table was a masterpiece of arrangement. Fine damask linen embroidered with the Archduke's monogram flowed to the floor. The place settings featured delicate porcelain from the Augarten Imperial Porcelain Manufactory. Each plate hand-painted with intricate floral designs or landscapes. Cutlery was of solid silver bearing family crests. Crystal goblets, slender and tall, awaited the pouring of the finest wines. The centerpiece was a spectacular silver epergne, a tiered structure designed to hold a variety of dishes and fruits, flanked by smaller arrangements of fresh flowers and delicate spun sugar sculptures, depicting allegorical figures. Records from the court indicate that this particular epergne was a recent acquisition, demonstrating the family's continued investment in luxurious dining ware. The meal began with a series of elaborate entrees, Platters of cold roasted game birds such as quail and partridge were presented, their delicate meat thinly sliced and arranged with vibrant garnishes of berries and herbs. There were also various galantines, boned and stuffed meats, typically chicken or veal, pressed into decorative molds and served chilled, their surfaces glistening with aspic. A popular item, as mentioned in contemporary culinary notes, was a dish of elaborate pate made from a combination of goose liver and truffles served in individual pastry shells. The fish course cultivate the freshness of ingredients available to the imperial kitchens. Large Danube, carp, baked whole and stuffed with a fragrant mixture of breadcrumbs and herbs, were presented on long silver trays. Alongside them were delicate fillets of pike perch poached in white wine and served with a rich buttery sauce. There were also smaller dishes of fried crayfish tails, a local delicacy served with a tangy mayonnaise. Side dishes included asparagus in season, blanched and served with hollandaise sauce, and minced purees of peas and carrots. Arranged artfully on small porcelain plates, the wine service was meticulous. Austrian white wines, particularly Grüner Veltliner, were served chilled in delicate flutes. Robust red wines from Hungary, favored by the Habsburgs for their depth of flavor, were poured into wider goblets. Champagne, while still a luxury, was increasingly popular and flowed freely throughout the meal. The imperial cellars, renowned for their vast collection, ensured a constant supply of excellent vintages for every guest. Music provided by a small chamber orchestra, positioned in a discreet gallery, filled the hall with classical melodies, creating an atmosphere of sophisticated refinement. Servants dressed in the characteristic imperial livery moved with quiet efficiency, attending to every need of the guests, ensuring glasses were never empty and plates were cleared swiftly and silently. The smooth choreography of the service was itself a display of Habsburg organizational prowess. The main roasts were brought in with considerable ceremony. A whole roasted lamb adorned with garlands of rosemary and garlic was the centerpiece, its succulent meat carved tableside. It was accompanied by platters of roasted venison and an unusual delicacy for the time, roasted turkey, a bird still considered somewhat exotic in Europe, sourced from one of the imperial aviaries. Each roast was served with a variety of rich gravies and sauces often flavored with red wine and forest mushrooms. Desserts were a triumphant procession of sweetness and artistry. Pyramids of fresh fruits, some from the imperial hothouses, like oranges and lemons, others imported from warmer climes, provided a vibrant display. There were numerous types of cakes. Intricate Sachertorte, a classic Viennese chocolate cake, alongside lighter sponge cakes filled with cream and fruit. Various custards, mousses, and jellies molded into whimsical shapes delighted the eye. Ice creams, still a relatively new invention and a sign of ultimate luxury, were offered in multiple flavors, including strawberry, chocolate, and even a coffee-flavored ice cream. The feast concluded with strong coffee and an array of sweet liqueurs, allowing guests to linger and enjoy conversation. This name-day feast, though not reaching the legendary scale of a coronation, served as a powerful reminder of the enduring grandeur and culinary excellence maintained by the Habsburg court, even in times of political transition. Number 5. Empress Elizabeth's fate for the Hungarian nobility. 1867. The year 1867 was a pivotal one for the Habsburg monarchy. The Austro-Hungarian Compromise was signed, creating the dual monarchy and granting Hungary more autonomy. Empress Elizabeth, or Sisi as she was widely known, had a deep affection for Hungary and played a significant role in fostering reconciliation. To mark this new era and celebrate the Hungarian nobility, Sisi hosted an extraordinary fete at Schönbrunn Palace, a grand event that blended Austrian imperial formality with Hungarian cultural flourishes, and it included a banquet of breathtaking opulence. The setting was the Grand Gallery of Schönbrunn, transformed into a dazzling display of light and floral artistry. Thousands of candles flickered in crystal chandeliers and sconces illuminating the ornate gold and white stucco. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies, roses, and orchids, imported from the warmest corners of the empire's hothouses and arranged in immense floral displays. Silken banners bearing the coats of arms of both Austria and Hungary hung from the high ceilings, symbolizing the new union. The guest list was a blend of Austrian aristocracy and the most prominent Hungarian magnates and their families. Gentlemen wore their finest military uniforms or traditional Hungarian hussar attire, rich with gold braid and fur. Ladies, particularly the Hungarian noblewomen, showcased stunning national dresses, adorned with precious stones, or elegant Parisian gowns. Empress Elizabeth herself, renowned for her beauty and fashion, was dressed in a gown that subtly incorporated Hungarian motifs, making a powerful statement of solidarity. Emperor Franz Joseph, ever the picture of imperial dignity, stood by her side, greeting guests. The atmosphere was one of palpable excitement and cautious optimism for the future. The dining tables, arranged in a vast E shape, stretched the length of the gallery. They were covered in the finest Hungarian linen, intricately embroidered with folk patterns. The tableware was a mix of precious Sèvres porcelain brought from France and imperial Wiener porcelain from Austria, each piece an artwork. Gold-plated cutlery and numerous crystal glasses for an array of wines and spirits gleamed under the candlelight. The centerpieces were truly magnificent. Towering silver épergnes overflowed with exotic fruits and flowers. Between them, miniature landscapes created from marzipan and spun sugar depicted famous Hungarian castles and natural landmarks, a subtle tribute to the honored guests. Court records indicate that these elaborate sugar sculptures were crafted over several weeks by a team of Viennese and Hungarian confectioners. The banquet was a multi-course affair, blending Austrian court cuisine with Hungarian specialties. The first course began with delicate consommé, served in individual porcelain cups, followed by platters of cold game galantines, often decorated with truffles, and aspic. One particularly noted dish recorded in an attendee's memoir was Danube sturgeon, poached and presented whole on a silver platter, generously adorned with mounds of Russian caviar, an incredibly expensive luxury at the time. The fish course continued the theme of luxury. Large, perfectly roasted pike perch, a favorite of Hungarian cuisine, was served with a rich paprika sauce, a nod to the Hungarian palate. There were also delicate preparations of smoked salmon and trout, accompanied by a variety of vegetable purees and rich cream sauces. Tiny artichoke hearts and blanched asparagus tips, carefully arranged, added freshness and color. Wine service was extensive and sophisticated. Fine Austrian white wines, including Rieslings and Gruner Veltliners, were poured alongside robust Hungarian reds, like Egri Bikaver. Vintage Tokaji Essentia, the wine of kings, was served in special thimble-sized glasses, its golden hue and intense sweetness reserved for moments of true indulgence. Champagne, flowing freely, added to the festive atmosphere, symbolizing the celebratory mood of the compromise. Throughout the meal, a combined Austrian and Hungarian orchestra performed, alternating between Viennese waltzes and lively Hungarian folk melodies, creating a vibrant and unique auditory experience. Towards the latter part of the dinner, a troupe of Hungarian folk dancers performed a short, energetic routine in an open space at the end of the gallery. Delighting the guests and emphasizing the cultural fusion of the evening, the main roasts were brought in with a flourish. Whole roasted calves, carved tableside, were accompanied by a variety of game birds, including pheasants and partridges, often prepared with Hungarian spices. A specific dish that gained renown was hussar roast, a succulent cut of beef prepared with paprika and onions, a traditional Hungarian flavor profile, ensuring the Hungarian guests felt particularly honored. This fusion of imperial and national cuisine was highly praised. Desserts were a true spectacle of sugary delights. Pyramids of exotic fruits, including pineapples and bananas imported from faraway lands, stood alongside mountains of Austrian pastries like Apfelstrudel and Sattertorte. A particularly impressive creation was a life-sized sculpture of a Hungarian folk dancer, crafted entirely from spun sugar and marzipan, standing proudly as the centerpiece of the dessert buffet. Bowls of freshly churned ice cream flavored with various fruits and liqueurs were constantly replenished. The feast concluded with strong Hungarian coffee and a selection of local brandies and liqueurs, allowing the guests to mingle and celebrate the new political landscape. This fête, meticulously planned by Empress Elizabeth, was not just a meal. It was a diplomatic triumph, wrapped in an exquisite culinary package, cementing new bonds between the two halves of the empire. Number 4. The Imperial Hunting Feast at Merling, 1888. The year 1888, just a year before the tragic events that would unfold, there saw the Imperial Hunting Lodge at Merling host a particularly extravagant hunting feast. Crown Prince Rudolf, the melancholic but highly intelligent only son of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, was an avid hunter, and these events were opportunities for him to entertain close friends and select members of the nobility, away from the strictures of the Hofburg. While often more intimate than state banquets, these hunting feasts were no less decadent, celebrating the bounty of the imperial forests with a wild, almost primal luxury. Merling, normally a private retreat, was transformed for this particular hunt. The main dining hall of the lodge, though rustic in its setting, was furnished with the finest hunting trophies and ornate wooden carvings. For the feast, the long oak table was polished to a high sheen reflecting the glow of the numerous oil lamps and thick beeswax candles. The air, typically cool and crisp from the surrounding Vienna woods, was infused with the scent of pine, wood smoke from the large fireplace, and the promise of a rich meal. The guests were a select group of Rudolf's hunting companions, personal friends, and some trusted members of the court. Gentlemen were typically dressed in their hunting attire, often made of sturdy Loden cloth, but of the highest quality, adorned with silver buttons and intricate embroidery. The few ladies present, often the wives of the nobles, wore more practical but still elegant day dresses suitable for a lodge setting. Crown Prince Rudolf, an engaging, if sometimes restless host, moved among his guests, discussing the day's hunt and sharing anecdotes. The dining table was set with heavy rustic earthenware plates, hand-painted with hunting scenes, a departure from the delicate porcelain of state banquets. However, the cutlery was still silver, and the crystal glasses were substantial and sturdy, designed to hold generous pours. The centerpiece was a truly unique display, a large, intricately carved wooden deer, its antlers adorned with wreaths of forest greenery and tiny electric lights, a marvel of late 19th century technology. Around it, platters of fresh forest mushrooms, collected that morning, and berries provided a natural, bountiful touch. The meal began, as was traditional, with a hearty, clear soup, often a game consommé from the day's kill. This was followed by a variety of cold appetizers that embraced the hunting theme. There were terrines of wild boar, laced with pistachios and truffles, and delicate pates of venison. A particular delicacy served was smoked trout, caught fresh from a nearby stream, served simply with lemon and dill, its flavor unadulterated. According to the notes of one of Rudolf's adjutants, the trout were sometimes caught by the Crown Prince himself. The fish course featured larger freshwater fish. Pike, often caught in local lakes, was roasted whole and served with a rich herb butter. Occasionally, if a larger river fish was available, it would be served poached. However, the focus of a hunting feast always quickly shifted to game. The drinks were robust and plentiful. Strong Austrian beers brewed in the imperial breweries were served in large steins. The finest Austrian red wines from the imperial vineyards were uncorked along with heavy Hungarian reds, chosen for their ability to complement rich game meats. Schnapps, a potent fruit brandy, was offered throughout the meal. Often homemade or from small local distilleries, contributing to the convivial atmosphere, entertainment was less formal than at the Hofburg. A small group of local musicians might play traditional Austrian folk songs on accordions and zithers, their melodies echoing through the lodge. Conversation flowed freely, often animated by tales of the day's hunt and light-hearted banter. The atmosphere was one of relaxed luxury, distinct from the rigid etiquette of formal court life. The main courses were, predictably, a celebration of game. A whole roasted wild boar, its skin crackling and golden, was brought in on a massive wooden platter, often adorned with its head and tusks. Making for a dramatic presentation, it was carved tableside by skilled gamekeepers. Large joints of venison, prepared in a variety of ways, roasted, stewed with wild mushrooms, or served as tender cutlets, were constantly replenished. Pheasants, partridges, and capercailles, all freshly shot, were roasted to perfection, their rich flavors enhanced by juniper berries and red wine sauces. A truly unusual, almost shocking display was a fully roasted bear cub, brought in whole on a large bier, its fur meticulously cleaned, and its paws outstretched, holding a large apple in its mouth. This particular detail, while macabre to modern sensibilities, was a sign of ultimate luxury and successful hunting prowess at the time, confirming the sheer extravagance of these private feasts. Records from the Maryland kitchens detailed the difficult preparation of such a large and unusual roast. Desserts, while still elaborate, often had a more rustic, seasonal feel. Large platters of forest berries, picked fresh that day, were served with rich cream. Hearty apple strudels, still warm from the oven, and plum dumplings were popular choices. There were also various types of chocolate cakes and delicate pastries, but the emphasis remained on traditional, substantial sweet dishes. The feast would typically conclude with strong coffee and more schnapps, as guests lingered by the fireplace, the sounds of the night forest just beyond the windows. This Mayerling feast, though smaller in scale than a state banquet, offered a glimpse into the intensely personal, yet undeniably decadent, world of Habsburg, imperial hunting and feasting. Number 3. The Christening Banquet of Archduchess Gisela, 1856. The birth of a new imperial child was always a cause for immense celebration within the Habsburg dynasty, ensuring the continuation of the line and the stability of the empire. The christening banquet for Archduchess Gisela, born in 1856 as the second child and first daughter of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, was a spectacular affair held at the Hofburg Palace. It was a joyous occasion, designed to reinforce the family's strength and the empire's prosperity. Following the solemnity of the christening ceremony itself, the grand ballroom of the Hofburg, a truly colossal space, was chosen for the banquet, true its ability to host hundreds of guests in breathtaking splendor. The room, usually a venue for waltzes, was transformed into an ethereal dining hall. Thousands of candles and monumental chandeliers and gilded sconces bathed the room in a soft golden light, reflecting off the polished parquet floors and the intricate stucco work on the ceilings. The air was filled with the delicate scent of white lilies and roses, arranged in countless silver vases throughout the hall, symbolizing purity and new beginnings. The guest list was dominated by members of the imperial family, including numerous archdukes and archduchesses, along with foreign dignitaries and ambassadors, and the highest ranks of the Austrian aristocracy. Gentlemen wore their finest court uniforms, often adorned with the Order of the Golden Fleece or other prestigious decorations. Ladies were resplendent in their ball gowns of silk and lace, adorned with diamonds and pearls, their hair meticulously styled. Emperor Franz Joseph, ever the formal host, greeted each prominent guest with a dignified nod or handshake, while Empress Elizabeth, looking radiant despite the recent childbirth, received congratulation. The dining tables were arranged in a grand U-shape, stretching the entire length of the ballroom. They were covered in the finest white damask linen, so delicate it seemed to float. The tableware was of the exquisite Sèvres porcelain, specially commissioned for the imperial court, featuring hand-painted floral motifs and the imperial crest. Solid gold cutlery, often used for only the most significant events, was laid out for each guest. Crystal glasses, etched with the Habsburg double-headed eagle, sparkled at every setting. The centerpieces were particularly imaginative for a christening. Intricate sugar sculptures, depicting cherubs, doves, and cradles, surrounded by arrangements of fresh white flowers and tiny, delicate marzipan babies. A particularly large sugar sculpture in the very center represented a fountain of youth, symbolizing the promise of the newborn archduchess. Records from the court confectioners noted the immense effort required for these detailed works. The banquet commenced with an array of delicate entrees. Clear, flavorful consomme. Often a turtle broth was served in exquisite porcelain bowls. Platters of cold roasted pheasant, adorned with their iridescent feathers, were presented alongside delicate galantines of chicken and veal, molded into elaborate shapes. A highly prized delicacy was fresh oysters transported from the North Sea, served on beds of ice, with lemon wedges, a testament to the empire's logistical capabilities. Memoirs from guests often mentioned the sheer variety and artistry of these initial cold dishes. The fish course featured substantial offerings. Large poached salmon sourced from distant rivers were presented whole on immense silver trays, garnished with fresh herbs and lemon. There were also delicate fillets of sole and turbot prepared à la meunière, or with rich white wine sauces. Smaller silver tureens held creamed spinach or purees of exotic vegetables, providing colorful and flavorful accompaniments. The wine flowed generously, reflecting the celebratory mood. Vintage champagne, imported from France, was poured into tall flutes, its effervescence adding to the festive atmosphere. The finest Austrian white wines, renowned for their crispness and elegance, were served alongside full-bodied Hungarian reds from the imperial vineyards. Tokaji Essentia, the golden sweet wine, was offered at specific points, its rarity emphasizing the importance of the occasion. The imperial cellars provided a seemingly endless supply of these precious vintages. Throughout the meal, a fully imperial orchestra performed light classical music from a raised gallery, providing a continuous, elegant backdrop. Later members of the Vienna court opera performed short, celebratory arias and ballets in a designated area of the ballroom, creating a truly immarious spectacle. The atmosphere was one of joyous formality, with dignified conversations punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses. The main roasts were brought in with a dramatic flair. A whole roasted suckling pig, its skin crackling and golden, was brought in on a massive silver platter, garnished with apples in its mouth and surrounded by fresh herbs. It was carved tableside, its tender meat distributed to the guests. Alongside this, there were large joints of roasted venison and beef, expertly carved, and a variety of game birds. A notable dish was quail in aspic, delicate quail breasts encased in shimmering clear jelly, an exquisite and time-consuming preparation. Desserts were a triumphant climax to the feast. Pyramids of exotic fruits, meticulously arranged and towering several feet high, provided a vibrant burst of color. There were countless types of cakes, from the rich sachetort to delicate almond cakes, all adorned with intricate sugarwork and fresh cream. Bowls of freshly churned ice cream and sorbets in a remarkable variety of flavors, including vanilla, chocolate, pistachio, and several fruit sorbets, were continuously replenished. A popular item was Kaiserschmarrn, a shredded pancake dessert often served with plum compote, a nod to Austrian culinary tradition. The feast ended with strong coffee, various liqueurs, and delicate petit fours. This christening banquet, recorded in court chronicles, was a lavish declaration of joy and continuity, a spectacular culinary and social event fitting for the birth of a new member of the August Habsburg line. Number 2. Emperor Franz Joseph's Golden Jubilee Banquet, 1898. In 1898, Emperor Franz Joseph I celebrated his Golden Jubilee, marking 50 years on the throne. This was an unprecedented milestone for a European monarch of his era, and the celebrations in Vienna were designed to be a grand testament to stability and endurance of the Habsburg Empire, despite its internal complexities. The Jubilee Banquet was the crowning jewel of these festivities, a display of imperial power and culinary artistry on a scale rarely seen even for the Habsburgs. The banquet was held in a magnificent festsaal, or festival hall, of the Hofburg Palace, a hall specifically designed for the grandest state occasions. Its vast, vaulted ceiling soared above, adorned with frescoes depicting allegorical scenes of imperial glory. Thousands of electric lights, a relatively new technology, bathed the hall in a brilliant, steady glow, augmenting the light from countless candles in monumental chandeliers and sconces. The air was rich with the scent of countless hothouse flowers, predominantly white and gold roses arranged in enormous vases and garlands throughout the hall, reflecting the imperial colors. The guest list for this Golden Jubilee was truly global. Heads of state, kings, queens, crown princes, and ambassadors from nearly every nation in Europe and beyond were present, alongside the vast array of Habsburg archdukes and archduchesses and the highest ranks of the Austro-Hungarian nobility. Gentlemen were resplendent in their full state uniforms, heavy with gold braid sashes and every conceivable metal and order. Ladies wore gowns of unparalleled luxury, many imported from Paris, adorned with historical family jewels that glittered under the brilliant lights. Emperor Franz Joseph, now an elder statesman, stood with immense dignity, receiving tribute from across the continent. His Empress Elizabeth was famously absent from many public functions by this time, but the court protocol ensured a seamless and majestic flow of events. The dining tables were laid out in a series of concentric squares, allowing for the maximum number of guests while maintaining a sense of order. They were covered in the finest lace and linen, each piece a masterpiece of textile art. The tableware was a collection of the empire's most precious porcelain from Augarten, often decorated with gold leaf and the imperial monogram, alongside solid gold and silver cutlery. Crystal glasses, each engraved with the Jubilee date, and the emperor's cipher reflected the light like diamonds. The centerpieces were monumental, multi-tiered silver sculptures depicting scenes from Franz Joseph's long reign, military victories, diplomatic triumphs, and allegories of peace and prosperity. These sculptures were flanked by cascading floral arrangements and intricate sugar creations, representing imperial symbols. Official records indicate that these unique pieces were commissioned years in advance. The banquet, designed by the imperial court kitchens to be a culinary journey, began with an impressive array of hors d'oeuvres and delicate consommes. There were miniature pâtés de foie gras served on toast points, and delicate vol au vent filled with truffles and wild mushrooms. A particular highlight was a consomme royale, a clear beef broth served with intricately cut vegetable garnishes and delicate custard shapes considered the epitome of refined taste. Fresh oysters from the North Sea, arriving daily by special express train, were served on ice, a symbol of unparalleled luxury. The fish course featured the most exquisite seafood available. Giant turbot, poached whole and presented on immense silver trays, was served with a rich, velvety lobster sauce. Delicate fillets of sole were prepared en papillote, ensuring their succulence, and accompanied by tiny, perfectly blanched asparagus tips and new potatoes with parsley. Seafood from the Adriatic, including fresh calamari and prawns, was also artfully presented, truding the empire's diverse access to resources. The wine cellars of the Hofburg were truly emptied for this occasion. Vintage champagne, some bottles decades old, flowed endlessly. The finest Rhine and Moselle wines, along with the most celebrated Austrian and Hungarian vintages, were poured. Tokaji Essentia, presented in miniature crystal flacons, was offered as a rare delicacy to each guest, its cost almost beyond measure. Fine cognacs and rare whiskies were also available for those who preferred stronger spirits served from crystal decanters. Throughout the lengthy meal, an orchestra of over 100 musicians performed a program of Austrian classical music, including works by Mozart, Beethoven, and Strauss, from a hidden gallery. Interspersed were performances by the Vienna Court Opera Ballet, whose dancers performed short celebratory pieces on a temporary stage erected at one end of the hall. The visual and auditory spectacle was designed to overwhelm the senses and to reinforce the grandeur of the occasion. The main roasts were brought in with an almost military precision by dozens of liveried footmen. There were multiple stations for carving. Whole roasted oxen prepared on massive outdoor spits were brought in and carved into succulent portions. These were accompanied by roasted wild boar, pheasants, and partridges, all sourced from the imperial hunting grounds. A particularly impressive dish was a saddle of venison, Baden style, a complex preparation involving elaborate stuffing and a rich sauce indicative of the high culinary standards of the time. Another more unusual dish mentioned in a contemporary newspaper account was a roasted whole lamb, meticulously deboned and stuffed with a variety of game birds. A true culinary marvel. Desserts were a final breathtaking display of sugar and confectionery. Towering spun sugar creations depicted the imperial crown and the dual monarchy's emblem. There were hundreds of different pastries, cakes, and sweet dishes, from the famous sachetorte to delicate petit four, each a miniature work of art. Bowls of various freshly churned ice creams and sorbets, some flavored with exotic fruits, were constantly replenished. A particularly ingenious creation was a jubilee cake, a multi-tiered confection adorned with edible gold leaf, and miniature sugar figures representing the emperor's family and his achievements. The banquet concluded with strong Viennese coffee and a selection of rare liqueurs and brandies, allowing guests to linger and enjoy the dazzling spectacle. This Golden Jubilee banquet, a testament to Franz Joseph's long reign and the enduring power of the Habsburg Empire, was a feast of truly historic proportions, remembered for generations as the epitome of imperial luxury. Number 1. The Coronation Feast of Charles VI in Prague, 1723. The coronation of Charles VI as King of Bohemia in Prague in 1723 was not just a political event. It was a grand theatrical spectacle designed to project the immense power and glory of the Habsburg dynasty across Europe. The associated coronation feast was the absolute pinnacle of this extravagance, a meal of legendary proportions that went far beyond mere sustenance to become a carefully orchestrated performance of imperial might and boundless wealth. It was arguably the most decadent Habsburg banquet ever recorded. The setting for this epic feast was the Prague Castle Riding School, a colossal space transformed for the occasion. The vast hall was draped from ceiling to floor with rich tapestries depicting the history of Bohemia and the Habsburg lineage, their colors glowing under the light of thousands of candles in immense crystal chandeliers and solid gold sconces. The air, usually cool, was warm with the breath of hundreds of guests, mingled with the scent of beeswax, expensive perfumes, and the anticipation of the feast. Elaborate floral arrangements featuring exotic blooms filled every available space, providing bursts of color against the heavy fabric and gilded decor. The guest list was a constellation of European royalty and nobility. Electors of the Holy Roman Empire, foreign ambassadors, princes, dukes, and counts from across the vast Habsburg dominions and beyond filled the hall. Their attire was a dazzling display of wealth, velvet and silk robes embroidered with gold and silver thread, adorned with family jewels, and heavy with the insignia of various orders. Emperor Charles VI himself, having just been crowned King of Bohemia, sat at the head of the main table, a figure of imperial majesty, his every movement a statement of power. Empress Elizabeth Christine, equally resplendent, sat by his side, completing the picture of royal grandeur. The dining tables were a truly unprecedented sight. They stretched for hundreds of feet, arranged in a complex pattern to accommodate over 2,000 guests, simultaneous. The linen was of the finest Flemish damask, specially woven with the Bohemian lion and Habsburg eagle. The tableware was of solid gold and silver plate, each piece exquisitely crafted, and bearing the imperial crest. Crystal goblets, some 2 feet tall and intricately etched, stood ready for the finest wines. The centerpieces were beyond imagination. Massive, multi-tiered sugar sculptures depicting allegories of Bohemia's loyalty to the Habsburgs, historical battles, and mythological scenes. One prominent sculpture was a life-sized horse and rider, made entirely of marzipan and sugar, an engineering and artistic marvel. Records from the imperial kitchens confirmed that dozens of confectioners worked for months on these ephemeral artworks. The banquet began with a grand service that involved hundreds of dishes being placed on the tables simultaneously. They were towering aspics, clear and shimmering, encasing entire landscapes of vegetables and meats. Enormous roasted capons, their skins lacquered, were presented on silver platters alongside roasted pheasants with their feathers meticulously reattached. A particularly unusual and expensive dish was venison in aspic with truffles, prepared using truffles imported at great cost from Italy. Another delicacy noted in contemporary accounts was a pyramid of cold seafood, featuring lobster, crayfish, and oysters, all presented on a towering silver structure. The fish course was equally lavish. Enormous freshwater sturgeon from the Elbe River, some weighing over 100 pounds, were poached whole and brought in on immense wooden platters, garnished with their roe and fresh herbs. Platters of sole turbot and cod prepared in a variety of complex sauces were also presented. Side dishes included numerous vegetable purees, gratin dishes, and bowls of tiny, perfectly prepared dumplings and noodles. The wine flowed without end. Barrels of the finest Austrian, Hungarian, and Bohemian wines, some decades old, were tapped, ensuring a constant supply. Champagne, a novel and expensive luxury, was served in unprecedented quantities. The legendary Tokachi Essentia was brought out in special crystal decanters, its golden liquid poured into thimble-sized glasses for the most esteemed guests, its rarity and value making it a true liquid treasure. Beer from the finest Bohemian breweries was also available in large quantities, catering to all tastes. Throughout the many hours of the feast, a full court orchestra positioned in multiple galleries played a continuous program of festive music, including new compositions commissioned specifically for the coronation. Interspersed were performances by court singers and dancers who performed short allegorical ballets and operas on a temporary stage, turning the dining hall into a grand theater. The sheer scale of entertainment matched the culinary excess. The main roasts were brought in with a dramatic procession. Whole roasted oxen prepared on massive outdoor spits were paraded through the hall on wheeled platforms before being carved into succulent portions by master carvers. There were also roasted wild boars, complete with their tusks, and a variety of smaller game, including deer, hares, and various fowl. One truly astounding centerpiece was a roasted bear, brought in on a gilded litter, its fur meticulously cleaned and restored. This was not meant for consumption, but as a magnificent display of hunting prowess and imperial wealth, a symbol of dominance over nature itself. Contemporary accounts confirm the shock and awe this particular display inspired. Desserts were a riot of color, sugar, and ingenuity. Pyramids of exotic fruits, some from the imperial hothouses, some imported from distant lands, towered over the tables. There were hundreds of different types of pastries, cakes, and confectionaries, each meticulously crafted. One notable item was a chocolate palace, a miniature replica of Prague Castle made entirely of chocolate, complete with edible turrets and flags. Bowls of freshly churned ice cream and sorbets in every imaginable flavor were constantly replenished. The feast concluded with strong coffee, various sweet liqueurs, and delicate sugared almonds. This coronation feast in Prague, chronicled in numerous contemporary records, was not just a meal. It was an unparalleled display of Habsburg power, wealth, and theatrical culinary art, leaving an indelible mark on the history of European court dining. It was a feast designed to be remembered for centuries, a true manifestation of imperial glory.